Okay, folks, good morning, and today is Tuesday, and so I welcome you today to join us for another little gig on some thoughts maybe that perhaps maybe become pertinent to your life. Today I want to talk to you about St. Paul. Now, most of the history of Paul is found in the book of Acts, usually around the ninth chapter, eighth chapter. But it's an interesting thing about his conversion. Paul's a nasty guy. He had a lot of anger in his heart and soul. Uh, he hated Christians, just absolutely hated them. He saw them as the work of the demon and the work of darkness. He was present when Saul was stoned to death. He held the cloaks of everybody else, and I'm sure he was probably uttering some kind of profanities and so forth as Stephen was being stoned. But in the ninth chapter of the book of Acts, it talks about Paul on his way to Damascus with the letters of arrest to incarcerate the early Christians, to bring them back to Jerusalem and to hold them accountable for the faith that that God has entrusted to them. And we know what happened on the way. Paul had this vision, fell off his horse. Nobody else heard it or saw it. And he was blinded and he couldn't see anything. And so they eventually brought him into the neighboring town, and the Spirit of God inspired one of the locals in there, Ananias, to go and see Paul. And he was afraid of him. He didn't want to go near him. And the Lord inspired him and said, listen, he's the guy I'm going to choose to bring my gospel to the pagans. And so he goes and he starts to speak with Paul, and all of a sudden these scales fall from his eyes. And then Paul started his great mission of conversion and new life. But it's interesting where they took Paul to when he fell off the horse. The place was called Straight Street. Now, I'm 75 years of my life. I lived in the city a lot of years. I never heard of Straight Street. I don't think Kevin has ever heard of Straight Street, and he lived in Springfield, and that's kind of an up-and-coming neighborhood where he was from, you know. But we were city people. There was 1st Street, 2nd Street, 49th Street, Springfield. There was Chester. There was Walnut, Spruce, Market, all the other business. But no Straight Street. Was there such a place at the time of the Acts of the Apostles? Could have been. But maybe not. And maybe St. Luke put that word in there for a reason. Because you see, Paul's life, there was nothing straight about it. He was doing the crooked road. And the crooked road will never get you to the right place in your destination, because it always takes you off track. And so Paul was off track. The Spirit of God interceded for Paul because Jesus wanted to use him. And when he fell off his horse, he was blinded. And the Lord said, Paul, Paul, why do you persecute me? And Paul said, who are you? And he said, I'm Jesus who was crucified. But they took him to Straight Street. The notion there was, in going to Straight Street, Paul was going to straighten things out in his life. He was going to figure out the right way in which he was to go. How does it apply to us? Well, I think there are times in our life that we find ourselves not on the straight street, that we live or act or think in a way which is not in conformity to the way the gospel wants us to live our life. Perhaps maybe we need to be knocked off of our horse, and we need to be blinded so we stop going around in circles or going in crooked ways, so that God's grace can then straighten things out in my life through His Spirit and inspire me to get back on the right track. There is no question that Paul had a great part to play in the development of the early churches in Christianity, especially those around the Greek Empire. Most Sundays when you come to Mass and you listen to either the first reading or the second reading, it's usually a letter of St. Paul. And it all is a reflection of his conversion and the grace of God that came to him to straighten things out in his life. So perhaps maybe our talk today is maybe a personal reflection in your own heart and life to see what's crooked. You know, things that are not of God, whether it's jealousy or anger or pride or any deliberate sin. That's the stuff you're just going to kind of get away from all that stuff. because it makes the road to heaven a lot longer for us. So may God's grace help you and me as we continue to walk this journey of life, always to walk the straight street, so that our journey to God will be direct, it'll be deliberate, it'll be purposeful, and the Spirit of God will indeed lead us, and we will grow more and more hungry for the God who is at the end of the street, and that's the person of the risen Lord. Okay, people, I hope you're all safe and just kind of hanging in there. We're getting a little antsy about this being locked up and locked out stuff, but we just got to kind of follow the guidelines until it's safe for us to move about. So please be safe. God bless you all.